remedy. The remedy. What's underneath the situation you don't realize? So let's examine with a critical eye. Put on your glasses and let it magnify the truth that lies hidden under all those lies. Cause everybody has nobility, and if you look beyond what your eyes can see, you'll see they're just like you and me, and now we're giving you the remedy. Welcome to the Remedy Podcast. This podcast is a project of WEBB Squared, a North Carolina nonprofit that works to increase wealth for Black businesses through connection, network, and opportunity. Our host is Stephanie Terry, the Executive Director of WEBB Squared, and our co-hosts are Associate Director Rinnie and myself, Mashallah Salaam. I am the Media and Production Specialist. In this podcast, we hope to bring consciousness to the racial divide and speak on emerging new narratives about race. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you will enjoy the podcast.
All right. Well, welcome back to season 2 of The Remedy. Stephanie, Mashallah, how have you guys been doing? We haven't talked since the launch.
Yeah, I've been doing great. A lot of new projects have come my way, so I've been pretty busy, but it's been really great.
And you got like a new job, new contract or something?
Yes, it's a really great nonprofit called Partners in Racial Justice.
Oh, that's
nice.
So great. We're really excited for you.
Yeah, we are. We're really happy for Mashallah. And I've been doing good. I'm back to my ballet routine. So I was in ballet today, and I'm back in ballet with a new attitude.
What is that attitude, Stephanie?
Is that I can be good at this, and I'm going to take it more serious. And I'm not going to be in ballet talking about, all the negative talk that I had in my head, like, well, what are you doing here? You can't do this. Yeah. No, I am gonna really channel my inner ballerina and get my body moving.
Oh wow,
So,
that's great.
Really exciting.
Yes.
You're a kick-ass ballerina, by the way. We saw you at that talent show.
Yeah, you did great at the talent show.
Okay. Now look, first off, the launch was amazing. This is my Oprah voice. Amazing.
It was pretty great. Do you guys?
You were Oprah then. That was you being Oprah at the launch.
Was I being Oprah at the launch?
Like you're the one that created this amazing thing, and like you were dressed like a queen. Everybody was looking at you. You were the main person at the event.
No, don't say that. No,
it was a very great program. It felt like just the perfect combination of people, like Lord Watson and Rob Santos and the band, like the John Brown Quintet. It was like, and everything seemed to be like, it was one of those like moments of time that kind of like stopped, and you're kind of in this like perfect moment.
Yes, Demita with Mama Africa. Mama Africa was in the building.
Yes.
And man, yeah, I think we're gonna remember this like forever. Like, it was truly a coming out launch.
And what was interesting for me was like afterwards, like people were coming up to me on the main drag of the plant saying, "Oh my God," and this one woman, a friend of yours, Stephanie, had tears running down her face. She was just so by the experience. And it's also kind of like reassuring that there's a whole community of people out there who believe in equity and interdependence and abundance and unity, and they're right there with us. We're not doing this work in a vacuum.
That's right. So we're ready. We're rocking and rolling. We got got a brand new season. We have a season. We're on season 2, Mashallah. What you know about that? You the producer.
It all happened so quickly. I was like, wow, we did 12 episodes?
I know.
We did. And not only that, we're in season 2 of The Remedy, but it feels like we're in season 2 of the work that we're doing for WEBB Squared.
Yes.
We've come out, we've had this big party, that was our focus. But then behind the scenes, it feels like we've changed direction. Now we're like thinking about, what do we have to offer entrepreneurs? What do we have to offer our community of people who are going to work with us and partner with us? And putting all those ducks in a row so that we can start our mindset entrepreneur trainings and workshops and programs in January.
Yeah, we're going to really, this year, this season on The Remedy, we're going to really unpack, like, what does it mean to be a human being? Like, we've got these minds, we've got emotions, where are we stuck in our mindsets? Like, how can we, manage, like the habits that we have, the good and the bad. Like, so it's going to be an amazing, amazing season of just kind of unpacking ourselves so that we can be as beautifully powerful as possible. So we're excited about this season. I think we take this all the way into, what is it, January?
Yeah, so the next 3 months of season 2 will run through the end of January.
Yeah.
So it's another 12 episodes. And
Yes.
What's also really exciting this time around?
What's that?
We're going to have a lot of guests.
Yes.
We're not going to have to do all the talking and all the figuring things out. We're going to invite people on to be in conversation with us about these things.
Well, here we're going to kick off season 2 of The Remedy. Yay. And we have guests. So we've got Orion. Orion, I have no idea what your last name. I'm just calling you Orion. Adrian. Orion Adrian. Okay. We've got Orion and Adrian, who we called because we have an analogy about our topic. Well, first off, our topic for today, Rinnie, what is it?
Well, we're looking at the analogy of, like, is the mind like a computer or a computer program? And if it is, like, are we being programmed? And we actually invited Orion, who is in the tech world, and he knows all about computer programming. And Ryan, why don't you just tell us a little bit, like, who you are and what your expertise is and all this?
I am a technical lead over at Lexis Nexus, working on our various cloud solutions. Part of my job is in dealing with machine learning and that same kind of like high infrastructure stuff that you would see at all sorts of modern businesses. And we've used artificial intelligence, and we continue to use artificial intelligence over Lexis Nexus, including machine learning.
Awesome. So, Mashallah, you going to play some Star Trek music?
I can.
Because we're gonna go to outer space. We're gonna go to outer inner space today. So here's where we want to start, because WEBB Squared, we in January are going to be launching our program. And so we're going to have these amazing workshops and trainings about designing the mind and deprogramming the mind and getting into how we can embody more powerful mindsets as entrepreneurs, and how we can kind of debug some of our bad habits, just things like that, so that we can express ourselves as powerfully as possible, because it's really challenging when you're an entrepreneur. It can get lonely, especially when you're doing a startup. So anyway, this is how we're going to kick off. So Orion, please center us, and I would love for you to explain so that we can understand it, how the way that we think in computer programs or like computers, like that analogy there.
So you start thinking back like Star Trek era and like the earliest computers, and they're really like recipes. It's like they have this kind of state and you following instructions and said you tell it to do this and then this and then this. Those don't really work much like the human mind. But modern techniques, machine learning, artificial intelligence, that's much closer. We actually people modeled these programs, these algorithms on the way the human brain works, because it's so good at taking disparate information and learning about correlations between them, right? It's not great at causation, that comes later, but being able to understand that, I see red in nature, I see yellow, these bright colors, and you start saying, okay, wait, that's danger, right? But then you see it on a tree and it's like, that's delicious, that's what I want. And that ability to correlate good effects with what you're seeing out in nature is basically, that's the human condition. That's how we survive. It doesn't tell us why the fruit is red or why it's delicious or even why it keeps us alive. But, sometimes that's not immediately necessary. So with machine learning, it's you take some sort of input, you turn it into numbers, right? Just some stream of numbers, and then you can put it out and say, okay, this is what we're looking for. And you need to train it. It's in that case, it's just like kind of like a kid, right? Who has to be like, okay, these sounds are language, and this is something that I can eat, right? And it takes that signal, right, between the input and what something that says success. Now, and for humans, it's dopamine and other things that, pleasure chemicals and things like that. In computers, you give it. It's like, so there's this really wonderful robot that they actually attach to these, like physically to like video games, like old school arcade cabinet video games. And the only thing they really tell it is the longer you get to play, the better you're doing. Actually, honestly, isn't that far off from what you would with a little kid. It's like, oh, I put the quarter in. How long does my quarter get me? And I'm improving. And just that one simple signal that says, okay, this is what you want. You want to play as long as possible. It actually figures out the entire game. And it becomes this thing. They've thrown Pac-Man at it and Centipede at it, and a lot of these old classic 80s games. And they've gotten extremely good at it.
Hold up. You said Centipede?
Yeah.
That was my game. Y'all don't understand. Centipede. Oh my gosh.
It is a classic for a reason.
Yes.
And honestly, the thing is, it requires a ton of training data. So when you go to like a website, it's doing CAPTCHA, and you're like, what are these are stop signs? What are these are roads? What are these are cars? That's you helping Google or whoever train its car AI so that it can also identify those things.
Wait a minute. Mashallah, have you used CAPTCHA before?
Oh, yeah, I use that all the time.
So you mean to tell me that you not only are you proving you're not a robot, you're feeding the robot information so it could be a better robot?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, if you remember, it used to be, tell me what these letters are. And that data was used to train what's called optical character recognition, so that we taught AIs how to read, so that they could read written text. And essentially what happens is that they have all this data. There's like, well, it couldn't correctly figure this stuff out, so we're just going to keep throwing these different variations in order so that we can train our AIs. Like, we, the humans, are basically doing this thing for Google and these other big companies. And then they're using it in their products. Eventually, it's once they figured out the street stuff, they'll move on to something else that they need, right? To train it to do some other kind of learning, right? Wow.
That has some implications. What are you thinking, Rinnie?
I'm just thinking, I just used that today. Like, tell me like how many of the little squares, how many of them have like traffic lights in it. I had no idea that by doing that, I'm like teaching a computer how to be more human, I guess, like to recognize things. That's really crazy.
So getting back to one of the core issues that they're finding in terms of AI and ethics is that it's still humans training these things. So if you have if the population has an unconscious bias that says dark alleys are dangerous or Black people are dangerous, you are going to end up with a system, an AI, that's supposedly supposed to be neutral, making very biased decisions that are just replicating the prejudices that the population has as a whole. And it's really important to know and understand that these things are just as bad as we are, except they don't even have the internal process to examine their belief structures. They're just literally coming to erroneous conclusions based upon correlation, which is where it comes down to that whole difference between correlation and causation here. As humans, we have a separate process, a different part of our brain that interacts with it that is, it's like, okay, well, why? Why is this the case? What's the larger context? And you can do that with machine learning to a degree, but it requires that you really take a look at it and come up with a much more complex model to try to find those things in it. You work on that, but that's not what people typically do, right? For the most part, it still takes a really long time to build these models, and you're throwing so much data at them that it's really just a matter of, okay, what's the quickest distance from where we're at to where we want to go? And it doesn't have an ethical core. It doesn't, if you don't build into it that human life is valuable, is important, it's not going to take that as a calculation. And you really have, the dignity of existence is not going to be something that the machine learning is going to do unless you can also put that in as part of your model. But for the most part, it's very much this, basic of can I identify what an apple looks like? Or can I figure out that this is the letter T? And not, is there justice? It doesn't have these concepts of these abstract concepts available to it.
So basically what you're saying is, so there's some similarities in the sense that our mind or brain processes have this correlation thing going on that we kind of call biases, right? That help us to make quick decisions, life or death decisions, keep us safe. But then the difference is and then our minds are constantly taking in data from the second that we were born, maybe even before then. But just taking in data. But we have the ability to ask why. Yes. And we have a sense of, I guess, principles, right? Of coming out of that core concept of philosophy that you can develop ethics as a person and as a society, because you evaluate, okay, well, what is good? What is moral? And we have emotions, right? We've got emotions. We have emotions.
And empathy.
Right.
That's not really built into the system. It's it also, the machine learning algorithms serve the beings who created them. So if they go in and Google's coming in, or Microsoft or whoever is building out these machine learning tools, typically they're serving, corporate interests because there's the people who are paying for it. And it's at that point it becomes, important that individuals in society hold them to account to make sure that the tools that they're building end up serving, just causes and not just in the pursuit of money.
What are you thinking, Rinnie?
I was just thinking about the whole idea of what you were talking about. Our minds have been soaking up this data since maybe before we were even born. And this idea, depending on where you live or what your culture is growing up or who your people are or your environment, we're only given a little tiny bit of data, I guess the thing is if we are teaching computers how to read and how to recognize street signs, and all of this is going into some kind of big data field in order to make computers smarter, and correlating that with our minds. If they're not given all of the data, just like a human being who grows up in a particular area with only a limited kind of like worldview or whatnot, they're not getting a whole picture of like humanity, and the computers and the companies and stuff aren't getting like a whole experience of humanity in order to be able to come up with algorithms that are just. It's just kind of a little mind-boggling that we're actually feeding our own human existence into machines, or our lack of human existence into machines in some cases.
So one of the problems that they've had recently with kind of machine learning, actually it's been going on for a while now, but they feed in they're using it for determining where to put police. And so you end up with this feedback cycle of you look at high crime areas, you see poor populations, you sometimes see Black populations, and then you're throwing more police at it, but it doesn't take into account why are there more arrests there? How, it doesn't understand that there's a racial aspect to this. It's just looking at one or two variables and seeing, again, correlation versus causation. In terms, again, and you're right, in terms of the people, they're not getting the whole picture. They also have the same basic logic of like, oh, well, I associate this group with poverty. I associate poverty with crime. And then in reverse, you end up with a different kind of prejudice, the positive prejudices that, for instance, when you start looking at companies and like you see a company that's very successful, we presume, it's called like the halo effect. You presume that they're doing all the right things. Even if they're actually terribly run, and maybe they just got lucky, or maybe it's just that you see the same thing with the markets. You have this huge inflation around this thing because it is essentially a shared delusion that they must be doing everything right, and then behind the scenes you find out that it was just all a lie, or they got lucky, or it was just, we all went collectively crazy. And there was actually this fascinating thing of like, with Wall Street, they have these like basic supercomputers with the machine learning where they're trying to predict how the market is going to go. And several years ago, there was an instance where the market just crashed, and none of the people around it could explain why. And it just this rapid, millions of trades per second, these machines are just going there constantly. They also built around the idea that they would try to trick each other. They would try to short sell or buy up in order to trick the other AI into making the wrong decision. And kind of like going in retrospect, one of the theories was that the two, these different algorithms, these different AIs, tricked each other into crashing the market. But the people around it's like, okay, what happened? And the more power we give these systems without any kind of oversight or really kind of deeper examination of how they work, the more power we give them, the more power actually just giving to the people who control them. And so you may end up with systemic failure because at the hands of a few people who have given the power to these machines that can then do billions of things in a second, and you're just completely out of your control.
And we're giving power to people that are not questioning their biases, not even aware that they have them or mitigating them, and then just making poor decisions based on, it's called the cognitive fallacies, right? So the making decisions based on associations that may not have any grounding versus the actual facts. Mashallah, how in the office, on the wall, you see those two posters in front of my desk?
Yeah.
That's where, implicit biases and cognitive fallacies. How are you taking this in, Mashallah? What are you thinking?
Well, I just was wondering if you knew what happened to make the computers do that in Wall Street.
I don't know if they ever did figure it out, other than it's like one thing. It's like a run on the banks. Or even the sense of like the basic economy. Is the economy doing well or poorly? There is a collective idea, but when you have something like this that's doesn't make decisions, maybe a few decisions a day or a few dozen decisions a day, is literally making millions or billions of decisions an hour. You have a system that is now capable of immense destruction, immense benefit too, if properly managed, but definitely immense destruction. And you may not have time to correct for the rate at which it's, correct what it's done, because it's doing it so quickly.
Do you feel like, I know this is going to maybe open a whole new cans of worms, new level of conversation, but on the flip side, if they are using us to teach the machines, and we're putting all this data in to teach it to read, how to recognize different things. On the flip side of that, are they using the machines to program us to think certain ways? I mean, I think about all this controversy, like on Facebook, social media, the algorithms that pop up, like conspiracy theories, and that some people start, and so I'm just wondering, what's the correlation on the flip side of that? Like, how are these things then shaping culture and society? And this idea that we're being programmed by the culture that we live in.
Absolutely, because we're fallible beings, and we're also hackable. We're eminently hackable. It's actually not that hard to trick people, to convince them, to get them, even to go all in and radicalize them. And when you have, they're feeding the same kind of things into YouTube and other things. Like, there's the whole joke of like, if you want to be radicalized, just leave YouTube on autoplay. I think that was like Samantha Bee, I think, or something like that. But
in my case, it's all cat videos.
That works too.
Radicalized by the feline population.
And it comes down to like that, because for YouTube, again, the motivation isn't justice. It isn't being our best self. It is, how do we make the most money? And they make the most money by keeping you engaged. And they can do that by basically keeping, more and giving you more and more radical things to shock you. It's like a stream of car wrecks almost. It's like, how can we bring you into this thing? And that's how they measure success. It's not justice, but profits. And as long as you have, in terms of civilization, the fastest way to become just immensely wealthy and powerful is to basically just make everyone do what you want through either coercion, trickery, enslavement. It is, can I basically take a portion of your life force and then consume it myself, not like in a metaphorical sense. So, you underpay your workers, cheat people, murder them, enslave them, whatever it takes. And one of the easiest ways, it seems, to control people is to also put them in this high stress situation. And this, bringing it back to the brain. It's like, if I can keep you always stressed and I give you simple answers, because it takes a ton of calories to power your brain. That's like a huge chunk of your daily intake of calories is just to power this.
So that means when I'm sitting down, I'm actually thinking I'm exercising.
Yes, you are.
You're burning some calories, Stephanie. There you go.
If you go, it's like you go and you're trying to solve puzzles or things like that. You end up burning a lot of calories. Mm-hmm. One of that was one of those things along evolutionarily, is that the size of our stomach was allowed to shrink as the size of our brain increased. And you see that, it's because we were much better at identifying high calorie sources of food. We are much better at acquiring high calorie sources of food. And so we can actually eat a smaller percentage of, like, you look at herbivores, they can really digest like calorie, like minuscule foods. They can really, because they have their huge stomachs, complex systems. We don't. But we also have this addiction to all sorts of like high calorie foods because we need that to survive and to basically to power our brain. But there are limits. There are limits to what it is capable of, and it actually allows for different kinds of things. Like if you're trying to be creative, you have to kind of be low stress. It helps to be kind of in a happy place and not having to think about all the bills and whether or not you're going to make it from meal to meal, or if your paycheck's going to cover you, or if your family members are sick. Creativity is amplified because the part of the brain is responsible for all of that. It's like, well, if you're stressed, clearly I don't have the calories to power that part of the brain. So I'm just going to fall back on the much more efficient emotional correlation system, right? It's just like, okay, so, and you see that in populations that are continually stressed. It's like, you're not going to be your best self. If you're constantly worrying about whether or not you can have enough food to eat, you're not worrying, you're not creating the next great literary art, probably. Now, exceptions happen and we cling on to those exceptions, but you see a lot more success in people who are able to manage their stress. And if you look at populations, it's like, oh, well, look at all of these are great thinkers and all of that. And it's like, well, if you take populations and you constantly deny them food, shelter, basic dignity, you keep them under high stress situations, they are not going to be able to thrive. They're not going to be able to be their best self. And they've even found that in some cases, that stuff is genetic. It actually damages our DNA, and we pass on those stress responses to future generations. So the longer that, in this theory, so the longer that a population has been kept in these high stress situations, have been oppressed, the more likely that they're going to have these issues throughout the generations.
So that's epigenetics. So let me sum up how I'm hearing it, and then I would love for you all to weigh in. So basically, we're in a situation now where, because I'm talking about America, I've never lived anywhere else, but because human beings, our ability to create technology is far surpassing our sense of justice, our morality, our ethics. And when that happens, you tend to, I call it, miscreate things that can destroy you. Right? It's like you're mature in one area and maybe in your intelligence, but you're completely immature in your social area, or the framework that you're working from is immature, because we're still in this framework of dependent, independent, so hierarchy. So win, lose, zero sum game. And so you're creating all this technology that is rapidly multiplying the outcomes of a framework like that, versus a more interdependent, which is a more mature paradigm for living. It's more relational, it's more holistic, and it connects like you see your connection and survival in other people. So that's where we're at. And then a small group of people, as compared to the larger population, as compared to the masses, creating this technology and then using all of us to help feed it. And then in turn, the technology, bad actors, let's call them that, bad actors can then use this technology to further exploit us in ways we've never been exploited before. Like we were exploited physically, now we're being exploited mentally and emotionally, right? And it's a hot ass mess.
Yeah, I'm kind of like thinking about that too. Like when you're talking about like technology is supposed to be here to help us, but it sounds like it creates more anxiety for us, and we can't get out of that culture of anxiety enough to step back and be like that more calm, creative person to think about how we're going to evolve to the next level of human existence. And because I don't know if it's like we are keeping ourselves in that state, or if it's because the technology is feeding us that anxiety, and so we're in the media, and we're staying in that state because the culture is in that state of anxiety. I don't know.
What do you think is the main cause of the anxiety?
I have an answer. Understanding whenever you feel alone, whenever you feel separate, that's anxiety producing. Whenever you think about yourself as physical only, that produces the most anxiety as well. This is my opinion. I may be completely wrong, but as a human being, because I think that we were created to be in relationship, and relationships that are not just tangible, meaning material. Because in actuality, in reality, things go away, bodies go away. Like, the material world, has a finite, time of existence. And so if we know ourselves only as physical, it is the most anxious, because this is like the easiest thing to hurt, right? I mean, the human body is vulnerable, people live and they die. Like, so as long as we separate or prioritize ourselves as physical material bodies and completely ignore the part of us that knows that it's thinking, the part of us that can ask why, the part of us that has consciousness of consciousness, the part of us that is immaterial, as long as we continue to marginalize that part of us, then, the anxiety, like, because I mean, I used to have panic attacks, like for real.
I still do.
Yeah, like, and it's debilitating. So that's why we're going to have these WEBB Squared programs. Woohoo! Because we don't.
It's definitely our work is cut out for us, Stephanie and Mashallah, to help create infrastructure and network of connected human beings that we can kind of take some of this societal stress off of our shoulders and just be in community together and grow and have a lot of fun in the process.
Yeah. Well, Orion, this was awesome. Like, we could just be talking about this for the next hour.
Yeah.
But we won't bore everybody.
We'd like to get you back on the podcast in like a few weeks when we talk about how we deprogram ourselves and catch the bugs of our programming, and how we and so we might have you back to talk about what it means to, debug computer programs.
All right.
Yeah. Because you said infrastructure. We're going to interrupt this infrastructure. We're going to disrupt it. So
that's our plan.
Thank you, Orion.
All right.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. This is my first podcast.
Give my love to the boys.
All right, we'll do.
All right.
Have a good evening.
All right. Bye-bye. That was awesome.
Yeah. So the boys are a bunch of his computer gaming people. They have
yeah. And we were just talking about social media, but we're talking about it now. We're going to talk about it because we want y'all to hit like. We got a YouTube.
Yeah, season 1 is all on YouTube, and I actually got it on Facebook podcast the other day too, because Facebook's getting into the podcast game. So now every time we upload our podcast, it will go onto Facebook podcast, and they will create, because speaking of like computers learning to do things, the Facebook algorithms will create a Facebook post automatically for us announcing our episode of our podcast. Yeah. No, I don't know what the implications of that, because we haven't tried that yet, but it sounds really cool that they will interface with the people who like WEBB Squared on Facebook somehow and let them know when our podcast has aired.
Yes.
Wow.
So
I mean, I'll still do that.
Yeah.
But apparently that's one of the perks for getting on Facebook, is they automatically do that for us.
So this is awesome. So can we just shout out some folks that came out to the launch? I really want to do that. I mean, I've been trying. We sent we sent thank yous by email, but I've also been texting folks, and I think we sent out some handwritten cards. But just thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Tim. Tim Alsop, you are the man. Tim is one of our advisory board members, and he has just been mentoring and guiding us every step of the way. I'm just so grateful. Thank you to all of our artists. Thank you to our entrepreneurs. There's so many people to thank. Rinnie, who else are you thinking about?
So I have created a list. These are all people who gave us like some monies beyond the people who bought tickets.
Yes.
So and so this is just the first round of thank yous, and the three of us like say a name and go around and thank each person.
Well, let me first thank Anna Richards. She is amazing. Anna has always been just a huge support, and I love her dearly. And she came out. I know she was busy, and she came out.
I'm gonna thank Bernice Malagon.
And let's see here, Emily. Oh, she lives in Pittsburgh. Emily, you are awesome. Thank you. And I lift up John Bonnets. I met John one time. We had a meeting, and he came out with support. He came to the event. I think he brought his family, so that was great.
Thank you, Lee Mobenzadeh. She's an awesome person and an amazing friend.
I will do a shout out to Kristen Copeland from Copeland Farms and the Kitchen, who the night of, they also are at the plant, and the night of the launch, 20% of their proceeds for that evening went to WEBB Squared. And so thank you so much, Kristen.
Yes, and thank you, Kathy Holt and Diana Hales. It was awesome of you all to come out and support us, and show up. Great.
Thank you, Soteria Shepherdson.
Oh, you get a triple thank you, Soteria. You are awesome.
And Soteria will also be one of our guests on the podcast this season.
Yes.
So we're looking forward to having a conversation with her soon. And let's not forget Rich Holloway from the Commonwealth Network, who
hey, Rich,
didn't come to the event, but gave us a little bit of support there.
Yeah, Rich and Terry Simmons. So we really, did we say, we did say, yeah. So we just really, we love y'all. Like, I'm just going to say it. We love y'all. And we thank you. We're extremely grateful. And we are looking forward to building and doing this work, knowing that we have the support of our community. So it's wonderful. Yeah. Well, I think that the podcast season 2, episode 1 is done.
Are we still going to say our catchphrase at the end of each podcast?
Yes, we are. Who wants
You'll
to
have
say
to remind me of what it was. Like, it's been a few weeks.
The revolution begins with dialogue.
Yes. All right, you beautiful ladies. I can't wait to see you next week. Podcast Tuesday, we'll have this podcast will be aired, and we'll record another one. And, this is really exciting. It's great to be back.
Yeah. All right. Let's see y'all later.
See y'all.
Bye.
This has been a joint podcast of WEBB Squared and Afro Future Productions. For those of you interested in learning more about our work at WEBB Squared, you can find out more at webbsquared.org. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. This is our conscious conversation. We hope you will subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform. Join the Remedy Membership Forum on Patreon to join us monthly for our members-only discussion. That's it for today. Until next week, thanks for listening.
What's underneath the situation you don't realize? So let's examine with a critical eye. Put on your glasses and let it magnify the truth that lies hidden under all those lies. Cause everybody has nobility, and if you look beyond what your eyes can see, you'll see they're just like you and me, and now we're giving you the remedy. The remedy.